All right. So thank you, everyone who's joined us today. We are very excited to be here with you. Compliance, testimonial marketing, those two things go hand in hand. And I think you've got an awesome expert here alongside me, Brian, as well as myself. We're both very passionate about testimonial marketing, and we know that compliance is such an important component of that and doing it successfully and helping your advisors grow. We get the balance, right? Your advisors want to grow, but you need to make sure they grow compliantly. So we're here to help you strike that balance when it comes to testimonial marketing. So today's session is the SEC de-risk alert, a compliance officer's guide to testimonial marketing. Most of you who are joining us today are compliance officers yourself. And we're just going to kick off with a quick couple of introductions and then a quick poll, because I'd love to hear from you. So I'll start with my introduction, then I'll pass it along here to Brian. But my name is Diana Cabrices. I'm the chief evangelist here at Wealth Tender. Another way of thinking about that is chief educator. My job is to educate advisors on the platform, on how to get found faster online with SEO profiles where people are looking for an advisor and they want to find one, but also with testimonial marketing and being able to showcase your reviews in a compliant way so that other people, as they look for advisors, can say, I really like this advisor. There's a lot of good comments here, and I think I should really reach out and talk with them. That's the goal, right? Is to get the conversation going. And then finally, with Wealth Tender, the media opportunities, helping advisors talk to reporters and journalists so they can get even more recognition online. I've worked with financial advisors for most of my career across a lot of different technology lenses. So not just digital marketing or testimonial marketing, but also succession planning, mergers, acquisitions, and a whole slew of other areas of their business. And I'm joined here today by Brian Thorpe, who's the CEO of Wealth Tender. Brian, I'll let you jump in and give yourself the introduction.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Diana, and thank you everybody for joining us today. So I've been in the industry 25 plus years. Most recently, before launching Wealth Tender in 2019, was the head of the key account team for Invesco. Had a terrific career there, over 22 years, working very closely throughout with legal and compliance. And as we look to talk about Wealth Tender, we certainly position Wealth Tender in the marketing, in the advisor community as a digital marketing tool. First and foremost, it's really designed for compliance. And so that's something we're really going to emphasize today. And I've always been a big believer that regulatory change creates opportunities for disruption. But I think it's really important to not confuse that with believing that it's smart to disrupt first and then hope for regulatory change to then follow, like we especially see in areas like crypto. So in our case, it's the regulatory change that came first in the form of the marketing rule that's providing us with a precise framework to follow and design Wealth Tender for compliance from the ground up. And in fact, it actually reminds me, for those of you that were around in 2006, we saw the Pension Protection Act that really opened the door for target date funds to become the default option for participants in 401k plans. And that in itself led to innovation, massive growth of target date funds, and became a tremendously powerful way that we could all help millions of Americans improve their retirement health. So today, the marketing rule has really opened the door for online reviews to help millions of consumers make more informed and educated hiring decisions. So we've designed Wealth Tender to specifically help advisors and wealth management firms confidently and compliantly benefit from the power of testimonial marketing to grow your business. So we want to help you accelerate the trust building process with clients and increase conversion rates of prospects into clients, and again, do that very compliantly. So today, very much looking forward to talking about how we've designed Wealth Tender with a lens on the compliance side of things and answering all of your questions in the live Q&A that we'll get to a little bit later today as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And hopefully those of you who have joined us were able to hear a little bit of Brian's background. He didn't mention he's also a member of the National Society of Compliance Professionals. So he is, surrounded by compliance, by frameworks and processes, and that's what he's most passionate about. So thank you, Brian. And we're so glad to have you here. For those of you that have joined us, we're going to go through here in just a moment, and we're going to look through an agenda. Now, I want to actually get to know a little bit more about you off the bat. If you're willing to share, it's totally optional. I'm going to launch a poll here in just a second. And hopefully you can hear me a little better. I realized I didn't have my mic plugged in, but there we go. It is plugged in now. I'm going to launch a poll, and if you're willing to share, we'd love to know, how many advisors does your firm currently support? So give me just a second here, and that should pop up on your screen. How many advisors does your firm currently support with compliance? Knowing this will help us tailor the rest of the presentation today. Although the framework that we're going to share really applies for big firms, for small firms, there are other pathways that we can create and that we do create for larger enterprises who are serving many, many advisors. So it looks like, we're a little bit split up here all around the house. I'm going to give us just a couple more seconds to answer for those of you who are willing to participate. If it doesn't apply to you, feel free to not answer the poll. And I'll go ahead and end this, and I'm going to share back the results with you. So we can see here, 60% of you are managing at least somewhere between 1 and 24 advisors. And then some of you are even more, 25 to 99. The other 20% of you are managing firms that have maybe up to 500 advisors. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And let's go ahead and move ahead here. One thing I like to do when I kick off a talk like this or a session is make sure you know what's ahead, right? I want to help you visually understand what we're going to be covering, where it's going to be helpful to you. First and foremost, as Brian talked a bit about the regulatory piece coming first. We feel that's very important. We're going to cover it, but I actually do want to talk a little bit first about some trends around advisor testimonial marketing and why we both know and believe it is not going to slow down. That's why you're here, is to get the help with that, to support your advisors. We will look at a review of the SEC marketing rule and some recent risk alerts. And yes, there are rumors that there will be another risk alert, simply because there is so much confusion around how to go about testimonial marketing compliantly. I mean, I have even seen some big names in the industry that are parts of firms that have a lot of advisors come out and give advice that actually is not very compliant. So we're here to get to the nitty-gritty with you on what's compliant and how we will help you get there. We'll talk about an introduction to our platform. We are the first SEC compliant testimonial marketing platform for advisors. We built technology that's infallible, that makes sure compliance is at the forefront of the entire process. We'll also talk about, again, how to use the technology, how to use it to create that SOP for your firm, and then we'll open it up for a live Q&A. Bring all the questions. Some of you drop questions in the chat, on the registration page in Zoom before the webinar, which we love. We're definitely going to cover your questions. Now, to kick off this first segment around testimonial marketing, I actually want you to hear from an advisor himself that we interviewed. And it just really, what you're going to see now, it really shares the power of reviews. So let's go ahead and take a look.
I got a client randomly from internet traffic that I usually don't get my clients that way, right? It's very difficult. And I asked them why they chose to call me. And the gentleman said, you had a really good review on Google, a good review, which I only had one. And this was before we were really allowed to. It wasn't a random. It was a client that unsolicited, she put a review on Google, for me. And so just one review, and he said, hey, I chose to call you because it was a really good review. And that was like, okay, I have to figure out a way to harness this, because I knew the rule was coming, the change was coming. I think it was November of last year. So this was a couple months prior to that. It was over the summer. And then when Wealth Tender came out with this process, it was only, fitting that I, took it upon a part of my marketing practice, and you guys just made it really easy to do that.
I love this video because it really was just that one review for him that helped get the call. Imagine if you were able to take that review and get it out in front of more prospects. That was just one prospect that saw the review. Well, we all know the problem with Google, folks, is that you can't just take the review as is and go promote it nilly-willy. You have to put some disclosures around it. So we'll be diving into Google as well. But let's start now with just sort of the eye-opening data around testimonial marketing for advisors. Now, there are many studies out there that exist that talk about reviews, the power of reviews. We can look to other industries like, attorneys and doctors, and we can sort of mimic that experience. Those are trust-based professionals, just like advisors are. However, when we find data around financial services specifically, we get really excited because this really truly is applicable to financial advisors. So what is the latest data? 81% of consumers say that online reviews are important or very important when making decisions about financial services. Again, this is in financial services. That is a whopping amount of consumers, 81% of them, they're already starting this behavior. It applies in their life for restaurants, for doctors, for lawyers, for cleaning people to come to their house. It's also now applying to how they look and search for financial advisors. And, when you really think about the buyer's journey, there are not just one side to it, right? There's really two sides. There's the factual side, the logical. So does this advisor, what kind of education does he or she have? Or what about their credentials? How many years of experience, right? Those are more of the factual things. But then you get to the emotional side of buying, which is a very, very prominent side of any decision to buy anything is going to be run by emotion. That's where online reviews start to come into play. What are other people saying about this financial professional? And referrals and word of mouth, right? Those all sort of stem right there underneath the emotional side of the decision. And put together, you come to this hiring decision. So we want our advisors to be able to satisfy this. We want them to thrive. We want them to grow. We just know we need to do it in a compliant way. So let's move into the latest on the SEC marketing rule, and then we'll eventually open up our technology. We'll show you how we make reviews compliant, whether they're coming from Google, they're coming from Yelp, whether they were left directly by a client. We'll get into all of that good stuff. Brian, I know you were going to run through some of these slides here, so go ahead and kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Diana. And I'll go through this fairly quickly. For those of you who are already familiar with the marketing rule, this may be a little bit of a repeat. So I'll go through it quickly. And then during the Q&A, if you have any particular questions, we can dive a little bit more deeply. But at a high level, when it comes to online reviews and testimonials, what the SEC is requiring is that the 3 clear and prominent disclosures accompanying every review cover off on whether or not the individual that wrote that review or provided that testimonial is a current client or not, whether or not they were compensated in any form or not, and then whether or not there are any material conflicts of interest. So fairly straightforward. And there are a couple of other nuances for sure, but for today's purposes, we'll really just highlight those, recognizing that last bullet on the screen also just talks that if there is compensation paid above a de minimis amount, $1,000 in any given year, then there does need to be a written agreement as well. But primarily what we're seeing, Diana, as we go to the next slide, is a real focus on just client testimonials. Certainly that's where a lot of you are really focused, I think, as well, in cultivating those feelings, the emotions, what your clients have to say. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. But first, what Diana's pulled up on the screen is the latest risk alert that we've seen. And as she suggested, we're hearing rumors there could be another risk alert and guidance coming from the SEC soon. In the June 8th risk alert, it was really a reiteration of what the SEC has already said, that they're absolutely looking to see and expecting to see those 3 C's, those disclosures that we just mentioned. Are these reviews that are being published online, whether on your website or on any platform that are being promoted by advisors, confirming whether or not the individual that wrote the review was a client, compensated, or had any conflicts? And then they're also looking at your Form ADV to see if that box is checked, indicating whether or not you're utilizing testimonials. And that's a little bit of a trap, because even if you don't have that box checked, now they're going to be expecting to not find any published testimonials. And if there are a number of reviews on Google, as an example, it's probably going to be a likely question that you can expect as to whether or not those were truly unsolicited. So if the SEC comes in and they're doing an exam, they're doing a sweep, and they find indications that those reviews have been solicited, that's going to be problematic as well. So we'll see what comes next on that front. From a registration perspective, obviously the SEC marketing rule is really oriented to SEC registered advisors, but we have also seen quite a few states that have now synced up. So for state registered advisors, really given the guidance that they can get started with testimonial marketing as well, as long as they follow the requirements by the SEC. So if any of you are working with advisors who are state registered, I'm happy to talk about that. We've been maintaining a database of the conversations we're having with regulators in each state to hopefully continue to see more states coming on board and syncing up. We also know Nassau is at least rumored to be talking about model guidance, and maybe that will help more states sync up to the SEC as well. The other thing, and especially important for so many firms that have duly registered advisors, so registered reps under FINRA have had the opportunity to get started with testimonials really for quite some time, but of course, without having this clear guidance in the form of the SEC marketing rule, it's really been difficult to do. So the good news is if you have duly registered advisors, the FINRA Regulatory Notice 1718 really provides that framework for testimonials that fits neatly within the marketing rule guidelines. There's just a couple of additional disclosure requirements, and so certainly material, but I would say non-material from the standpoint that it's any more complicated. So I think very straightforward to be able to now help whether advisors are fully SEC registered or both duly registered, the opportunity for advisors in your firm and for your firm to get started with testimonial marketing compliantly and confident in your ability to be compliant with both FINRA and SEC rules.
Yep, keyword compliantly. And think, Brian, just a little emphasis here on Nassau. I mean, I think Bahamas right away, but obviously, can you share a little bit there about, how we're engaging with them and like the green light, red light list that we keep? I'm sure people on the line might find that helpful to them.
Sure. So at this point, we're still waiting for Nassau to come forth with their model guidance. And so until now, it's really just been more the individual states making determinations on their own, some of them that incorporated the SEC marketing rule by reference. So it was a fairly straightforward and more or less automatic process that as the marketing rule came out, the state would adopt and follow in suit. In the case of Nassau, there's a number of states that we've spoken with that have said, they're choosing not to proactively go forth on their own and instead hoping for model guidance from Nassau. So it's a little bit of a wait and see on that front.
Yep, absolutely. Let's talk about Google and Yelp. There's a lot of discussion around this. Some people say, hey, you have to get reviews on Google, and we're not here to say that you shouldn't because we think it's helpful, but there is a very important way to go about this. So Brian, if you want to kind of share here, what are some of the problems with Google and Yelp when it comes to reviews?
Sure. So one of the things I would say first and foremost, when we look at other trust-based professions, doctors and lawyers, it's really been the proliferation of sites specific to those industry verticals that have helped doctors, helped lawyers get reviews and promote them and get them in front of high intent consumers that are interested in their services. And that's really what we're focused on at WealthTender as well, and being able to do that, of course, compliantly. Now, in those professions, Google and Yelp are permissible because they don't have the same type of regulatory requirements that exist in our space. But I just wanted to emphasize that even with Google and Yelp being available, it's really many of the platforms that are industry specific that if you were to talk to a doctor or a lawyer, they would say that's really where it's important for them to be featured. So this would be sites like ZocDoc or lawyers.com, findlaw.com, amongst a number of others. In our industry, the challenges with Google and Yelp are more than a couple of things. So one, even the policies of Google and Yelp prohibit businesses from soliciting reviews that are compensated, or believe it or not, Yelp actually prohibits solicited reviews by policy whatsoever. And then beyond that, in our industry, you're not going to be able to promote reviews on Google or Yelp. Naturally, if you have unsolicited reviews on these platforms, that's terrific. You still can't tell somebody, hey, go look at my Google reviews or Yelp reviews, though, because at that point, you've adopted or entangled yourself with those reviews that now become advertisements of your firm, and without the appropriate disclosures, that's going to be problematic and a violation of the marketing rule. And so taking it even a step further, looking at Google specifically, they don't allow anonymous reviews. The SEC marketing rule does permit reviewers to be publicly anonymous. We have a process to make sure that you know who they are. So if somebody provides a review, you can incorporate the appropriate disclosures. In the case of Google and Yelp, you're not necessarily going to have those same controls. And so a couple other things to be aware of with Google, we've seen advisors that actually had reviews on Google just lose them for no good reason, because sometimes Google's algorithms will flag certain reviews as being an issue and then they just get removed. So that's a little bit of a red flag and something to watch out for. And then the opposite being, if you as a compliance officer have a review that gets posted to Google and you feel it's problematic, it's going to be a really arduous process to try and get Google to take that down. And so we have seen some compliance officers who are a little bit more liberal, suggesting that it's okay for their advisors to solicit reviews, to ask their clients to write reviews on a site like Google. The problem is if that review comes in and it includes promissory language, or it includes language that's considered off limits, now you've got yourself in a real pickle, because you're not in a position that you can add the appropriate disclosures for that to be compliant, and think that's really going to be problematic. I see that Nikki has asked a question asking if I can repeat. WealthTender allows the reviewer to remain anonymous. So yes, and we'll walk through that. Essentially, we allow the reviewer to be publicly anonymous. However, we require that the reviewer provides their email address so that we can share that with you, with your advisor, or with your compliance department, whoever that notification is routed to, so that you know who that individual is, so the appropriate disclosures can be added, and then have the opportunity to ensure that if that reviewer wants to be publicly anonymous, they can do so. So you know who it is, but publicly, it's not going to necessarily need to disclose their name. I see another question from Parthiv regarding guidelines around soliciting non-compensated reviews on Google. So in fact, if you want to go maybe to the next slide, I think we cover this a little bit in here, Diana. So on this particular slide, I think this is going to be really interesting, Parthiv. So in FINRA, with their guidance on testimonials, they specifically state that they do not regard unsolicited reviews on social networks to be an issue. So implicitly, what they're saying is if you've solicited a review on a third-party platform, then it becomes an advertisement of the firm, subject to all of the disclosure requirements that we would expect to see with that review. So we haven't had particular guidance on this particular issue. As the SEC, I've reached out to them to say, hey, could you be explicit in providing us guidance on whether or not you, the SEC, are comfortable with advisors soliciting reviews, requesting reviews be written on a platform like Google that's not designed for SEC compliance. Is that problematic? And they haven't to this point updated their FAQs or responded to that. But we put this slide up here for the very reason that we've already seen precedent on the FINRA side that suggests if you are soliciting on a platform, then that's going to be problematic, because that act of solicitation is going to trigger the additional disclosures. So if the SEC were to take a position to say, well, based on FINRA precedent, we're going to follow suit, then we would expect that to also be problematic as well. You're on mute, Diana.
Thanks so much. And thanks for the questions. Remember, feel free to drop them at any point throughout the presentation. We have a dedicated spot at the end, but if Brian would like, we can certainly go through them as we run through the information to make sure it's relevant for you in the moment and you get that question answered in the moment. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about technology, using technology to build out a compliance SOP for your firm, standard operating procedure. We know that when you're, working with and managing compliance for several advisors, SOPs could not be more important. I'm sure you have it for everything else that you manage for them, for their communications, advertisements, digital marketing, whatever it might be. They likely have to follow a very solid process in order for it to be compliant, not just with the regulators, but also with your firm. And that's a bit what we're finding, right? As Brian and I talk to many advisors about testimonial marketing, some of them say, hey, our firm the compliance team hasn't put in a policy yet. We need a firm policy, even though we know what you're doing is compliant. our compliance team hasn't created a firm policy yet. And so that's why we're here. That's what we want to help you do. When we think about some of the other advisors who their teams have created these policies, we've absolutely been there to talk with them, to run pilots with them, to help them get comfortable. These are things that are totally on the table for any of you that are here with us today. Now, before we dive into the technology, and Brian's actually going to show you in action how it works on Wealth Tender when someone leaves a review for a client, how it would look for you, how it would route to you. We're going to get into all that fun stuff. I did want to launch one more quick poll, and this one is really just getting a feel for how many of you actually have, a standard operating procedure, some sort of firm policy that you've created at the firm level around testimonial marketing for your advisors. So yes, you've got it. It's in place, sort of, but it needs some work, and not at all. So feel free to answer if this applies to you, if you are compliance within a firm, or if you're an advisor on the line. We might have a few of you here with us. If your firm has a policy, or if it doesn't have a policy, feel free to answer. I'll leave this open here for about 2 more seconds, and we will end this poll. And it looks like we're perfectly split. We have some of you that do have a policy, some that have one, but it needs work, and then some that don't have one at all. So this is good to hear. Thanks everyone for sharing. Let's move right into this segment. And actually, I'm going to hit pause really quick. This is the same interview that you saw a moment ago, but this time we're hearing from Russ Thornton. He's the advisor down at the bottom right-hand corner, and he is a Wealth Tender user. His firm, Wealth Care for Women, uses Wealth Tender reviews on their website, but also on the Wealth Tender website. And we'll show you how that looks as well. But let's hear from Russ.
The thing that so appealed to me about Wealth Tender's approach to this, which also, again, seemed to appeal to our compliance folks, was that it's a very thoughtful, well laid out process. And so speaking personally, and what I would encourage others to do is don't overthink it. Like Brian and his team provide you an email template that you can just basically send out to your clients. I did very little, if any, editing to that, and just send it out. So kind of like what Ia was saying, like left to my own devices, if I get into too into my head and thinking like, how should I wordsmith this, or how should I go about this, then it might still be on my to-do list. So I literally just kind of took a paint by numbers approach, followed the steps, went through the process, and it's been a very easy and smooth experience so far.
All right. We really love and appreciate Russ. He's been a great advocate for Wealth Tender. We're going to talk to you a little bit about why we even launched certified advisor reviews. And then again, Brian's going to hop into the technology here. So Brian, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure. So importantly, again, as I said at the outset, big believer regulatory change creates opportunities for disruption. But I think disruption sometimes has a bit of a negative connotation. And here, what we really respect is that the SEC put forth this rule in the best interests of consumers to help them make more informed and educated decisions. So when we think about certified advisor reviews and we think about the disclosures that are being added, we really put our consumer hat on to think more about how we're providing that transparency and less about the regulatory requirement, right? So of course, everything we've done is designed to meet those regulatory requirements. But at the end of the day, it's providing that benefit to consumers to help them truly feel more informed, more educated, reading these reviews, reading how terrific the advisors are making their clients feel, and having that confidence to be able to reach out and have that initial conversation. But of course, importantly, knowing whether or not the person who wrote that review is a current client, whether or not they were compensated, whether or not there are any material conflicts of interest. So that's really from the consumer perspective. But of course, we definitely wanted to make sure we've got everything buttoned up from a regulatory perspective as well. And so what we'll go through, and I'll share my screen here as we do this, is an example of what that experience is like for a consumer, as well as for you, whether it's the advisor or the compliance officer, the role that you play, and how you would like that workflow to work for your firm and based on your preferences. So let me share my screen here, Diana, and what I'm going to pull up now is the profile of an advisor on Wealth Tender. So this is the Emily Rassam. We can see her Wealth Tender profile here. I should mention that the reviews feature on Wealth Tender is opt-in. we have a lot of advisors that, whether they're in states that haven't given the green light yet to get started with online reviews, or are not yet able, based upon just their firm still getting their policies buttoned up, that are on Wealth Tender, taking advantage of the SEO and a lot of the opportunities for the visibility with the thousands of consumers coming to the site each month. But in the case of Emily, since she's opted in, you do see the reviews that she's received across the top. And then as we scroll down her profile, again, just briefly, we see a lot of great information about Emily, helping people get in touch. But then we're going to see this reviews tab where people can write reviews and we can see the reviews that she's received. So just briefly looking at an example of a review that she's received, we see the 5 stars, all of the details about her that somebody has provided, and then these 3 bullets. So these get back to the 3 clear and prominent disclosures that the SEC expect to accompany each and every review, literally within the 4 corners of the review. So whether or not it's a current client, we can see this is a current client who received no compensation and there were no material conflicts of interest. So really straightforward. And then if somebody wants to write a review, it's as easy as coming to this button and they can put in their 5 stars, the title of the review, the details. And this gets back to the options that we provide for the consumer. So they can indicate how they want their name to be publicly displayed. This could be their full name, first name, last initial, or if they want to be fully anonymous, they could choose to put anonymous here as well. But then we do require that email address just below that's never shared publicly. This is simply provided to you and your firm, so you are able to confirm the identity of the individual and provide the appropriate disclosures. So importantly, when somebody clicks submit your review, it's not immediately published. What happens first is there's going to be an email that's generated to either the advisor, or this can be routed to an ad review department or a compliance officer, or both, the advisor and the compliance department, that provides the notification you have a new review. Here's how to sign in and see the pending review, along with all of the details of the review provided within the email. So this is a great way to keep record of those incoming reviews on file for SEC purposes as well. We provide the link that goes to the pending review details. So this is an example of a pending review for Emily, where we can see the pending review content. We can see the name of the person as they want it publicly displayed, and then the email address that confirms the identity of the person with the review. So if that had said anonymous, we would still know who that individual is. And then we simply provide the advisor or your compliance department with the ability to check the boxes indicating whether or not the person who wrote the review is a current client, whether or not they were compensated, and if there are any conflicts. Of course, you have that ability to click the other button and provide a free-form description for any disclosures that require a little bit more detail. And then separate from those 3 clear and prominent disclosures, if you do need to provide additional disclosures, more of the kitchen sink, we provide a field where you can do that. And then once you've provided all of your disclosures, you click submit, and it's at that point that the review will then be published on the Wealth Tender profile page, like those that we were looking at here. So with that, Diana, I will turn it back over to you to take the screen back.
Awesome. And it looks like we have a question in here from Susan. Susan is asking about cherry picking reviews or deleting negative reviews.
Great question. So when a review comes into the platform, again, it's routed to you, to the firm, but the advisor, if you're worried about advisors, as an example, having the ability to delete the review, that's not something that the advisor is able to do. So to your point, in terms of cherry picking, the SEC wants to ensure that advisors are not simply displaying their best reviews. And really at the outset, what we encourage advisors and advisory firms to do is to send out an email to all of their current clients, just so you can check that box with the regulators to be able to show, if they were to come in, that you weren't cherry picking at the outset. And then as the reviews come in, it's definitely a requirement that all of those reviews are being published if you are going to continue to be in the reviews game, as we call it. So our goal with the platform is to ensure that you've got the ability to provide all of the appropriate disclosures, get those reviews published. And if you have that 1-star review, which, by the way, if you were to talk to any doctor or attorney that's been consumer facing, they're all going to have their story of a negative review. But it's just part of life. And there are even statistics showing that even with a negative review, people actually tend to trust the veracity of reviews even more. So it shouldn't be seen as a negative. We know that's going to be a hurdle and a risk, just from a psychological perspective, that advisors need to get over. But short story, advisors don't have that ability to get rid of those reviews just because they don't like them.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And I know the slide that we have up now just shows exactly what you just showed on the platform in action. For some of you who may have never had exposure to Wealth Tender before, you might be wondering, well, where does this profile fit in and how do these reviews fit in? We are essentially mimicking what other industries have, what ZocDoc has, what Find a Lawyer has. It's just really for finding an advisor. How do we drive consumer to the site to begin with? We've got educational content that we have our writers create that talk about, what is a CFP? Why is that important? Or if you're a small business owner, what should you know about your taxes, right? There's a lot of different pieces of content that drive them there. And from there, we sort of introduce them to the advisors on the site. Whether you have reviews or not, your advisors are going to be, plugged into this directory. They can search based on their zip code. They can search based on, specializations that they're looking for. Or again, if you're a small business owner and you want someone that works specifically with you on that, that's how they can search. And so they're getting connected with these advisors, but they're evaluating them based on the reviews that they have on the platform. So again, just to kind of recap what Brian just said so beautifully and what he had to show, when someone puts that review on their profile page because they've asked them, or in a moment, you'll see where other places that we recommend, they sort of give the option for their clients to leave reviews. The advisor gets notified via email with all of the details and a link to the certification form. They would reply with the required disclosures. So they're answering those questions around those 3 important disclosures. I like to call them the CCC: client, compensated, conflicts of interest. And then finally, they submit the form to Wealth Tender and we publish the review. So again, if you needed to fit into this process as a compliance officer, we could route these reviews directly to you to take through the certification process on behalf of your advisors. And moving ahead here.
And Diana, while you're doing that, I might just chime in on
Sure.
the chat with the comments from Megan and Susan.
Okay.
So, there's definitely been the questions being raised in the chat around what about a negative review that's on a public site? Does that constitute a complaint? And if so, that certainly from a compliance perspective has potential regulatory implications and actions. So one of the things that I would suggest there is, even before the SEC marketing rule, Google and Yelp have been around, and any consumer has had that opportunity to go out and write a positive or a negative review about any firm. So there's always been that risk out there that somebody could go out and put a 1-star review about your firm or about an advisor on any platform out there. So what we really believe with Wealth Tender is you're actually now being in a better position to control the experience simply by being proactive and reaching out to clients who your clients really love you, they love your advisor. You're going to get a lot of great reviews. And so certainly there could always be that issue where a negative review could come in. But at least with Wealth Tender, you're going to have that opportunity to add appropriate disclosures. If you need to do anything with it, you can. The challenge is you don't have that control with sites that are already out there like Google and Yelp. So ultimately, we simply believe that while that's always been a risk and continues to be a risk, using a platform like Wealth Tender that's designed to help you address any of those issues with appropriate disclosures is going to be a much better outcome for you, for your advisors, and for your firm than not having any control of a review that might be out there otherwise.
Awesome. Super helpful. Thanks again for chiming into the chat. Susan, Megan, feel free to keep the questions rolling. Anything else you want to add to that, Brian, before I get into the requesting of the testimonial?
Go ahead. Well, actually, the one additional thing I would just say is the concern over 1-star reviews is, again, I think psychologically something that we all fear. Like, oh, Diana, after we wrap up this webinar, you think any of them are going to give us a 1-star review? I hope not, but we'll have to roll with it if they do. But what we've seen and what Diana's going to talk a little bit more about on this slide is just how likely consumers, in this case, clients of advisors, are to say very positive things about their advisors. So we've seen hundreds of reviews come in, and 99% are 5-star reviews. We have yet to see a 1-star review come in. So everybody's really just excited. And again, you would expect this. It's kind of like if you think about Uber, like Uber drivers, I think the lowest rated Uber driver, even though we know there's some bad ones out there, is 4.x, because the vast majority of people feel grateful for the experience. They're being responsive and they're providing a great review. And that holds true for us as Uber drivers and Uber passengers. And so it's definitely going to be a little skewed here. I think we're in professions like lawyers, where even if your lawyer did a really good job for you, but you lost the case, you're probably going to see more 1-star reviews, which had nothing to do with the services you provided as an attorney. It just is that the outcome wasn't something that was satisfactory to the client, even though you did everything you possibly could have. So again, I think the circumstances in other professions are a little bit different, but Diana, I'll let you kind of share a little bit more about what we've learned from this slide.
Well, yeah, and just to piggyback on what you said, and it's something that you're passionate about, is the pent-up demand. And Brian and I were actually just at a conference with over 100 financial advisors this week in Detroit, Michigan. Pizza is amazing there, by the way. And one of the advisors shared his experience with asking clients for a review. And he said a lot of his clients were like, finally, what have you, I've been waiting for this. Like, I'm surprised you didn't ask me sooner. And that's that pent-up demand that most clients have. And again, through the hundreds of reviews we've seen on Wealth Tender, 99% of them are 5-star reviews. And I know the ones that are 4-star are just because, they don't want to leave a 5-star review. Some people just won't ever leave that 5-star review. There's always room for improvement, I guess I should say. Around requesting, I know we've already talked a little bit about this first. We always tell our advisors, talk to your chief compliance officer first. Maybe there's a process that they've created here, and we're going to help you create some of that process in some of these next slides. But we, of course, encourage send an email to all of your current clients, right? We don't want to have any sort of risk around the SEC thinking you're cherry picking. And these reviews are going to help prospects learn about the client experience, right? But we also say, invite some influential non-clients who respect you to write a review, like other specialists in your niche. Advisors love connecting with advisors, industry experts, nonprofit organizations. This is just going to help get more reviews to the table that are also going to be help focused on your character as well as a professional, not even just as an advisor, but your character as a professional. We do provide this template for our advisors to use. You can have this template as well. In fact, all of you will get a copy of these slides just for being here with us today. But with this template, it's short, sweet, to the point. As Russ mentioned, he didn't really make too many modifications to it, just maybe a few tweaks here and there, and he sent it out. And that's when he started having success with getting those positive reviews. So we do provide this to our advisors. In fact, we have an entire playbook on testimonial marketing. And this is one of the things that are in that playbook. What else are we helping advisors with? Well, when you think about where else can you ask for the review without necessarily reaching out via email and asking for the review, we always say add a link in your email signature. If you're on Wealth Tender, we give you a QR code, we give you a link. It could live right in your email signature. People click on it. It takes them right to that spot on your page on Wealth Tender where they can leave a review. We also encourage them to add a section in their newsletter at the bottom. Did you like this newsletter? Do you like my content? Feel free to leave a review here. An instructional flyer for the office. So maybe a flyer on, we love reviews. They help other people find us easier. Please leave a review here. And again, it's that QR code that we're already building for them. They can also put a dedicated section on their website. Wealth Tender does have an embed widget where advisors can put reviews on their website. It's going to pull all of those reviews from Wealth Tender and it puts them in a nice, beautiful scroller. They don't have to worry about, getting that custom developed from whoever provides their website, which would probably cost them a lot more money as well. We are not in this business to try and charge advisors hundreds of dollars to get their reviews on their website. We make it really, really simple. And I'll show you our pricing here in a moment. We also say, hey, incorporate a request into your client review. That's a great time to ask for that review. And then finally, propose a charitable donation as compensation. So as you're all aware, compensation is a factor. It can be a factor with reviews. Perhaps it might not be a firm policy for you, and that's okay. But for the ones that do have that and they are eligible, that's another way that they can go about asking for the review a bit indirectly. So to quickly summarize, and in fact, we have a few more things that we do want to share with you, and we want to hear from you again if you're willing. The reviews piece in the industry for advisors, for consumers, it's really not going away. It's only going to speed up with more demand and become more and more an integral part of a consumer's buying journey in finding their advisor. So we know how important that this is. At the same time, since the SEC has released and updated their new marketing rule, people have been a little bit all over the place with how to implement it correctly, with some compliance teams just saying no outright. And now they're losing advisors because they're not going to stick around if they can't get help growing their business or the compliant process to be able to grow their business using these modern marketing strategies. That's really and truly what this is. It's the new way of consumers searching and finding advisors. We want to help them do that, but we know we want to do it compliantly. And then what you saw with Wealth Tender, with the platform, with the technology, the process, using technology to really lock that in tightly, we want to help you do. And then, of course, on your end, with your own policy as you create it, helping your advisors compliantly ask for the review. And then where else can they really not directly ask for the review, but still get that opportunity for their clients to get exposure to the fact they have a place for them to leave a review. And it is compliant. That could not be more important. Now, I want to just share a quick little thing about Wealth Tender here. We have some awards and accolades that speak to our success. We're still growing, but we're growing very fast. We were recently recognized as the top Mighty Mites digital marketing solution for our extraordinary user rating. So the advisors that do use Wealth Tender, they rave about Wealth Tender because it's simple. It is less than $1 a day to be a part of, and compliance officers also love Wealth Tender. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from the compliance officers that we work with, and just the fact that the process is so simple. How much are we charging advisors? Well, it depends on what package they go with. Today, we only talked about one component of the platform. There's truly three. We briefly touched on the first, which is how to find an advisor, right? So, consumers come to our site. We have over 500,000 people in the last 12 months visit wealthtender.com to find an advisor to look at those reviews. But we also have the reviews feature. So now they can see those reviews. That's the second part. And then the third part is the media opportunities, which isn't for everyone, but we've got partnerships with journalists. We've also partnered with MSN.com, for example. So our advisors are getting invites every single week from a reporter saying, hey, I want to talk to an advisor on X topic. Now, they don't have to use any of these features. They can just use one. They can just use all. But as you can see, our pricing is pretty low in comparison to the value that they're getting here. So if you've got a starter plan at $29 a month, you get your profile page, you can turn on the reviews feature, and we're going to list you in some of those local guides. The growth and elite, you start to get a little bit more into getting the media opportunities or access to our content library if you want to use content. But again, they don't need those things with the starter plan. They get everything they need with the profile and with the reviews. If you have many advisors in your firm, we will work with you on pricing. And we're happy to share that. We're already starting to do some enterprise pilots with some of the biggest broker dealers and RIAs in the space that we're very excited to partner with. So we know what we've built here is pretty special if we're already being considered by some of the firms that are going to start working with us. So again, we'll be happy to work with you on pricing here. I want to open it up for Q&A. And while I do this, because I know some of you've got some questions here, I also want to launch our last poll. So based on what you've learned today, if you're interested in learning more about Wealth Tender for your advisors, let us know. We'll be happy to contact you. Regardless, you're all going to get a copy of the slides and a follow-up email with a recording of this presentation. But feel free to say, yes, contact me. Hey, maybe later, or not right now, but thanks anyway for the information. And again, regardless, you will get an email follow-up with the slides, with the recording. You can do with that as you wish. Maybe you want to share it with some of the other compliance folks on your team. Maybe you just want to save it for later. We know that you're all very busy people, but we hope you'll consider testimonial marketing as a serious growth avenue for your advisors. Again, we don't feel that it is slowing down, and we want to help them as well. So going into some of the questions that we got, it looks like most of them actually already been answered, but we did get one other question in the registration here. We might have already answered it. I'll read it anyway. Yes. What happens when negative reviews populate and how to handle them while staying transparent with SEC and FINRA regulations? So, Brian, I think you pretty much spoke to that. If there's anything else you want to add, let me know. Otherwise, I think this has been a success. Everyone, thank you so very much for coming. Susan, thank you for your comments. Everyone that had questions, thank you for sharing them with us. We'll definitely do another one of these sessions again in the future. We love to work with compliance teams, as mentioned, so you will absolutely be hearing from us. Brian, any last words on your end?
I really appreciate it, Diana, and thank you, Nikki, Susan, and Parthiv, everybody here. So I know it was a little bit more of an intimate group today. Matt, James, Christine, give everybody a shout out. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and very excited for the opportunity to help all of you help your advisors succeed with testimonial marketing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.